Hello horse lovers, welcome back. Today we're going to continue the How to Go Bitless series with the turn signal. By now most of you are probably already turning your horses. There is a reason that turning is one of the first things that a rider learns when they get on a horse. Pull left to go left or right to go right is almost like a rite of passage. But since we're thinking riders, we're going to put a little bit more thought into the process. So in this video, we're going to be looking at a few different approaches that riders can take when it comes to turning, and how you can help your horse to understand what you're asking. Now, before I even touch on the different rein signals that a rider can use to turn their horse, I'm going to briefly cover using the seat again. When you begin a turn, it's always good to look ahead in the direction that you want to go. When you turn your head, your spine starts to twist, which affects your shoulders, your core, and your hips. All of that affect the way that the horse receives the signal. It's almost like your spine is a carousel pole that your horse is centered around. When you turn your head, the first thing that's going to happen is that your shoulders are going to turn as well. Your arms are attached to your shoulders. So when this happens, your one arm will start to create a shorter inside rein, while the other one starts to extend closer to the horse's head, giving it more outside rein. Essentially, this means that your body ends up pulling on the inside rein without you actually having to pull on the inside rein. As you travel down the spine, you get to the core and pelvis area. When your pelvis turns or twists, your pubic arch and thighs create a twisting force around the rib cage. The outside leg should soften a little away from the shoulder, opening it up so it can swing slightly further. The rider's inside hip anchors itself over the horse's inside ribs, helping to stabilize the horse and drive himself forward from the inside hind leg. The rider's legs will automatically align with the horse's body, so there's no need to worry about if your outside leg must be back or your inside leg must be forward, or how much pressure you're putting on which leg. And because you're anchoring your weight slightly more on your inside hip just to stay balanced in the turn, you don't have to worry about how hard you're pushing on your leg. Instead, by simply doing one thing, turning your head, your body will automatically create a series of micro signals that will help your horse to understand that you're asking him to turn. These micro reactions also help him to turn, so they make his job easier. All these things are signaling to your horse to turn by twisting him and rebalancing his body weight. So instead of watching your hands or your horse's neck or ears, look out ahead to where you're going. And remember to make sure that you're clearly signaling with your head and neck which direction you want to go. It can be confusing to your horse if you turn your head the wrong way. And while that sounds silly, I have seen a lot of riders do this, especially in jumping when they're looking ahead to another jump and their body isn't properly balanced in the turn. If you need to strengthen this signal, try pointing your belly button in the direction of the turn. For the most part, however, all you have to do when asking your horse to turn with your seat is to turn your head. It's that simple. Alright, now we move on to rein signals. The first signal that everybody learns and everybody's familiar with is a direct pressure signal. The rein that you're pulling on directly moves the horse's head in the direction that you pull it. The direct rein signal is the first signal we're teaching because it can be used for a safety stop, but that definitely isn't where the learning process should stop. This brings us to using strong direct pressure. For most of us, a strong direct pressure signal is given by shortening the inside rein and pulling a bit away from the horse's body towards your elbow. You're essentially forcing the horse's head in the direction that you want to go. While this is standard practice for most young riders, it is not the only way to signal a turn. And not having a bit doesn't mean that you have to be strong with your hands. That leads us onto the topic of soft direct pressure. Often, it's the horses that you have to pull hard on to turn that don't really understand the signal. These horses are just responding to their environment, the same way that you're forced to step away if someone shoves you from the back. If that person comes again and touches you from behind, you're not going to step out of the way just because they shoved you the first time. You didn't learn a lesson from being shoved. You simply responded to being shoved. It's the same for a lot of horses who are difficult to turn. They're simply responding to being shoved around without actually understanding that you're actually asking them a question. Please, can you turn? Apparently, my friend is illustrating the reaction of a mare for this video. Another common problem people get is horses that lean into pressure. This is an instinctive reaction for most horses. It's a lot like how you might want to push someone back if they shove you out of the way. But for horses, it's got more to do with the fight for survival. The problem is that, apart from putting the horse in the wrong mental state for learning, the rider and horse start to lean against each other for balance, and it ends up as an unpleasant fight. If you really want to have good communication with your horse, you need to help your horse to understand that you're asking them a question, not just pulling them in a tug-of-war competition. This is where soft, direct pressure really comes into play. By applying a gentle pressure on the reins with a turn of your head and shoulders, you're essentially posing a question to your horse. Please, will you turn this way? You haven't forced an involuntary action. You've requested a voluntary response. Now take a moment to say that back to yourself, because that is the foundation of pretty much all good training. So you've asked your horse if he will turn, and if he figures it out and responds the way you want, you'll reward him straight away so that he knows that he got the right response. If he didn't quite figure it out, ask a little bit harder in small progressions. Ask and release until he does start to realize that you're posing a question and figures it out. Keep doing this over and over until your horse understands the question from the smallest amount of pressure possible. Just a little side note here. If you decide to teach your horse this at a halt first, only ask him to turn his head. Horses ideally need to be moving forward to turn their bodies. So if you ask him to turn his body when he's not moving forward, the movement of his head pulling to the side can actually block his forward movement, which could lead to it feeling uncomfortable to perform this task. So help him out a little bit by first asking him to move forward slowly and then initiating the request for a turn. A good, soft, direct signal will come about simply by turning your head and letting your spine twist. The chain reaction that this creates is enough of a change in rein pressure, weight distribution, and torsion to successfully encourage your horse to turn. If you do need to apply slightly more pressure, try to pull your rein back towards your hip, not out to your elbow, which can unbalance you, and especially not over your horse's shoulder. Crossing the rein over the wither asks the horse's wither to fall or move outward, and that's something that we usually use for lateral movements like leg yield. So don't use it for a simple turn signal because you're going to confuse your horse and hinder his response. Now we move on to the topic of indirect pressure. This is a very worthwhile aspect of riding to explore. Not only is it more comfortable for both you and your horse when you're out hacking, but it teaches the horse to seek to connect with you both mentally and physically so that it can always understand what you want. I've trained a lot of horses using both direct and indirect rein pressure, and it doesn't seem to be something that confuses them very much. So if that was a question that you had, don't worry about it too much. Just give them the opportunity to give it a try. The most common form of indirect rein signals is neck reining. In this instance, the horse is being asked to turn away from the pressure of the outside rein rather than being forcefully pulled by the inside rein. The inside rein is usually soft and inactive. The outside rein is leaning across the outside of the horse's neck, putting a gentle pressure on it that asks it to move its neck out of the way. Remember to combine the signal with a turn of your head and the subsequent natural seat signals that make it easier for the horse to understand, especially in the beginning. And again, when your horse does get it, remember to reward him so that he understands that he got it right. For most people, this is where they would end their training. But if you really want to, you can take it a step further. If you really want to play with this concept and take it one step further, you can move on to reinless turning. The easier version is to use your hands, or you can use a short whip if your horse is comfortable and feels safe with one of these. And essentially all you do is you gently tap or push near the base of the neck and ask the horse to turn away from the pressure. This is essentially the same as neck reining. But because the signal isn't directly linked to the horse's head, you'll have to think a little bit more about what you're asking him. Again, when he guesses correctly what you're asking, give him plenty of praise to reaffirm the behavior. The absolute pinnacle of this process is to teach your horse to turn its head from the twist in your legs and thighs. This concept is beautifully illustrated in this video. The final step will require a lot of patience and practice, but it's well worth the effort regardless of what style of riding you plan to pursue. Not only will it make the horse super light and responsive, but it will help the animal to maintain its balance through the turn. This helps to protect the body from damage during riding and also increases the safety of horse and rider. For most horses, mimicking the rider's turn is something that they're doing naturally anyway, but being asked to respond to just this signal can really improve your horse's understanding and sensitivity when it comes to the turn signal. That is a really awesome thing for general riding, but it's also super useful if you're planning to go on and do dressage at a later point. Of course, it's also probably going to benefit you if you want to do neck strap or bear riding at some point. Well guys, that's it for this video. I hope that this guide for telling your horse how to turn was useful to you. Please feel free to let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. And in the meantime, happy horse keeping, everyone! Okay.